Stauch was 11 years old when he was reported missing on January 27th of 2020. He lived in Colorado Springs, Colorado, with his father, Albert Stauch, stepmother, Letecia Stauch, little sister, whom I will refer to as Elle, and his older stepsister, Harley. On the morning of the 27th, Gannon Stauch didn't attend school. According to his stepmother, he had stayed home because he had a stomachache. She then also alleged that he left his house around 3:15 p.m. to go to a friend's house, and that he had left in a blue fleece hoodie, blue jeans, tennis shoes, without his cell phone, no jacket, and no book bag. According to her initial statement, she became concerned when he didn't return home at 6 p.m. like he was asked to. She sent Harley to the park to look for him, and also reached out to Albert to let him know that he didn't come home from his friend's house. When she was asked what his friend's name was, she told people she didn't know, that Albert took care of all of that and was always the one who kept track of the children, even when he wasn't there. Gannon was officially reported missing at 6:55 p.m. by his stepmother, Leticia Stauch. The El Paso County Police responded to her 911 call at 10:09 p.m. I know what you're thinking. Why so late? A call made at around 7, not responded until 3 hours later. The reasoning is because T was smart. She reported Gannon as a runaway. In many states, runaways aren't priority, so they get put to the bottom of the list of calls. This investigation, starting out as a runaway, gave T crucial hours and days even before investigators were truly digging into Gannon's case. At the time that Gannon was reported missing, his father, Albert Stauch, was out of town doing military training. Alarmed that his wife told him that his son was missing, he immediately returned home. He flew back into town on the morning of the 28th. Gannon's biological mother, Landon Hyatt, lived in South Carolina at the time of his disappearance. When Landon was notified that they believed Gannon, quote-unquote, ran away, she knew her son, and she knew that that was not the case. She immediately caught a plane and flew into town to help search for him. The morning of the 28th is when things started to fall apart for Letecia Stauch. That morning, she had to pick Albert up from the airport. Upon arriving to the airport, she rented a vehicle and left her Tiguan parked in the parking lot. When people asked her why she rented a vehicle, she claimed it was because of her lease. She didn't want to drive around searching for Gannon, putting the extra miles on her car. This didn't make sense to pretty much anyone on Facebook that she was telling this to, because she only put 71 miles total on the vehicle while she had it. She then began to claim that she rented the vehicle because what if Gannon seen them coming and was scared and he might hide from them? This led to the obvious question of, well, why would he be scared and hide from you? Investigators think that the real reason that she rented a vehicle that day was because she put Gannon in the trunk of her car sometime in the early morning hours between the 27th and the 28th. Also on the 28th, Gannon was upgraded from runaway to endangered missing person. Investigators say that it was because the weather was below freezing that night with snow flurries. He was under the age of 13 and he requires medication. I'm sure that those reasons played into part as to why they upgraded him, but I also think that T's erratic behavior played a part in that as well. On the day of the 28th, she had been avoiding detectives' phone calls, text messages, and was acting erratically. She was disappearing for extended periods of time, and no one was quite sure why or where she was. On January 29th, T was supposed to meet with investigators around 10 a.m. She didn't arrive until almost noon. She also made a trip to the car wash before going to meet with them. It was during this interview that the investigators heard the first huge change in T's story. She actually brought notes to this interview and requested to read from them. In her new account of what happened on the 27th, T and Gannon arrived home around 2:30. They went into the basement where she was attacked by a man named Eduardo. According to T, this man held her at gunpoint, but for some reason he allowed her to go upstairs to send Elle outside to play whenever she arrived home from school at 3:15. She then returned to the basement where Eduardo essayed her over the course of an hour. At some point during this grueling attack, she claims she hit her head and she blacked out. She woke up to Gannon jumping on Eduardo's back and trying to fight him off of T. Helpless, she watched as Eduardo took a suitcase, a cardboard box, and Gannon. And she couldn't stop him because, unfortunately, at this point, she hit her head again and blacked out for a second time. Investigators, as you can imagine, didn't believe T's accounts of these events. Typically, if someone's holding you at gunpoint, they're not going to let you leave so that you can go talk to someone else in the house and then come back. Not only that, but T did not have any injuries whenever police responded on the 27th. She also didn't have any signs of injuries during this interview. The other thing is, T herself released the ADT security system records to Facebook. And guess what? Those records don't show any movement in the house before her and Gannon arrived home. We also seen camera footage from one of the neighbors, and we were able to see T and Gannon leaving that morning and then returning home. What we didn't see, however, was any Hispanic males entering their home or walking in the neighborhood. Towards the end of T's awkward interview with investigators, they seized her telephone. They also detained her while they applied for a search warrant to obtain her DNA. Leticia began stuffing tissues that she had used into her pockets and said that she was having chest pain and shortness of breath. Investigators immediately requested medical assistance, and paramedics from the Colorado Springs Fire Department arrived. T was then transported to the hospital via ambulance from EPSO for further medical assistance. Oddly enough, during the ride, T was completely unresponsive to questions by medical personnel, and she seemed to have a miraculous recovery once they arrived at the hospital. To be honest, this is the first of many medical issues that T has claimed to have during the course of this case, so it's no shocker really that this is how it started out. Investigators continued to detain her once she was at the hospital in order to get a DNA sample from her. They also tried to get a search warrant for a SANE exam, which is basically a rape kit. T, however, did not allow a rape kit to be completed. T herself told investigators that she cleaned up after the crime scene involving Eduardo. Investigators on the 29th found brushes in the dishwasher that contained traces of blood. They also used a reactant agent to find blood, and they found a lot of it. There was blood in the utility room, the hallway leading to the garage, in his bedroom, under the carpet. There was also blood on electrical sockets. They found blood on T's shoes, blood in the back of the T-gon, on the dashboard, on the glove box, and there was also blood on a teal couch pillow from the basement. We don't know the exact date that the DNA profiles came back, telling investigators that this blood was all Gannon's. Investigators didn't tell us till nearly the end of February that they even thought that he was deceased. January 31st is whenever T. Stauch did her backwards interview. She had to do a second take to pretend to cry and ask for Gannon to come home. Mostly, she spent her time demanding apologies. After that interview, with her belongings in tow and Gannon in the back of her rental van, she drove across the country. Through the weeks that we all continued hoping, praying, searching, looking for Gannon, she just continued her online presence, making excuses, pointing fingers, throwing up false accusations, false claims, even claiming that Landon's ex-husband had been involved in Gannon's disappearance. Seemed she was willing to throw just about everybody under the bus to take the heat off of herself. Unfortunately, every piece of information she put out just made herself look that much more guilty. It wasn't until she was arrested on March 2nd of 2020 that we learned the true horrors of the crimes that she committed against Gannon. I'm going to read you the timeline of events that happened the days leading up to Gannon's disappearance, according to the arrest affidavit and the preliminary hearings. On January 25th, Albert took his mother, who had been staying with them, to the airport, and he stayed the night in Denver so that he could fly out in the morning. On January 26th, T took Gannon and Lena to Garden of the Gods and Burger King. That's also the day that we seen T's sugar daddy account accessed. T's Google searches depicted her state of mind over the events leading up to the 27th. She was Googling things such as find real military singles, I'm overdoing all the work for my stepkids, their mom doesn't help. My husband's ex-wife does nothing for her kids. I wonder if my husband's ex-wife is sending me a Valentine's card since I raise her kids. One day, some people will wish they treated you differently. Why should my husband choose me over family? Between the sugar daddy account being accessed and these Google searches, it's safe to say that T was frustrated in her role as a stepmom. She may not have thought that Albert was giving her the love and attention that she needed. Perhaps he was focusing too much on the children instead of her. My personal thoughts are, she was never anticipating to be a full-time mommy to 2 little kids. She likely thought that they were only going to be there for a small period of time and then go back to stay with their mom. However, that just wasn't the case. Once they were there, Albert wanted them to stay there. According to T, later in the evening on the 26th, Gannon knocked over a candle in the basement. Text messages sent at 10:54 p.m. describe the candle incident and Gannon being very upset. T took photographs of the alleged candle incident, and then she also recorded a video. And in this video, we hear Gannon crying. There's 2 different versions of this video out. One, people claim that they can hear him saying, "I'm bleeding." In the other version, it stops just before that sentence would be recorded. I personally seen it as soon as it was posted to T's page. And I honestly believe that the original video did in fact have Gannon saying, "I'm bleeding" at the end. I think once people started commenting on it and pointing that out, she took it down, edited it, and put it back up. Slightly after midnight on the 27th, T started searching things like, "My son burned the carpet, how do I fix it? Will the humidifier help if exposed to smoke? Colorado laws for kids staying home. School is out, is it okay for my kid to stay home alone? My son is sick, but I have to go to work. My son is sick, can he stay home? Suede repair kit for sofa." She also texted her employer that morning and told them that she couldn't come to work because her stepdad was killed in an accident. T didn't know that the school district had already planned to fire her. According to their records, she was let go that previous Friday for lying on her application. At some point through the evening, we also know that text messages took place between T and Albert about bath salts, and Gannon asking about bath salts. At 8:13 and 8:17 in the morning, Leticia took photographs of Gannon sleeping in his bed. He was quote-unquote sick that day, so he stayed home from school. Even though T claims that Gannon was sick, they spent the whole day running around. She went to Petco twice that day. Around noon, Al sent a text message to Gannon's phone saying, "Hey, buddy," and Gannon replied about an hour and a half later asking if he could play Zelda. At 1:43 in the afternoon, Gannon's phone made a search asking, "Can my parents find my cell phone if it is off?" Investigators have noted that that search they believe was conducted by T because it was similar to the format in which she worded her searches. My personal opinion tells me that this is likely where investigators are getting the premeditation from. That Google search was 40 minutes before she murdered Gannon. At 2:19 p.m., T pulls back into the driveway. 2:22 p.m., she enters the home. Investigators believe that T then takes Gannon into his room and murders him within the next 15 minutes. Gannon suffered from a fractured skull, a gunshot wound in the lower left jaw, stab wounds to the left chest and right back, 18 sharp force injuries in all. He had several defensive wounds showing that he likely fought back. All of this happened so quickly, and she had very little time to clean up before Elle came home. Once little Elle got home, T met her at the door, told her to go outside and ride her bike. She scurried to clean up as much as she possibly could. At 4:42, Harley arrived at the residence. She had been told to pick up little Elle. T then sent them to the shopping store with a shopping list, carpet cleaner, trash bags, and baking soda. She bought herself time, and that's what she needed. Time to clean up this crime scene. Time to get rid of as much evidence as she possibly could before she called the police to report him missing. Time before she had to lie and say that he was a runaway. At some point, we know that she stuffed Gannon inside of a suitcase with his blankets and his pillow. She then rolled him through the house and put him into the back of her Tiguan. The evening of the 28th, after she had picked Albert up in the rental car, she went back to the airport and retrieved her Tiguan. It was that evening the GPS data shows us that T drove the Tiguan to Highway 105 South Perry Park Road and left Gannon. If you remember, during the searches, they spent a lot of time in this area, sifting through snow. They eventually found a board with Gannon's blood on it and clothing that they believe may have belonged to him. For her backwards interview on the 31st, before she left town, T went back up to Highway 105, where she retrieved Gannon. Investigators were concerned after finding the board with blood on it that they may never actually find Gannon's body. With the wildlife in that area, they just assumed that perhaps he had been taken. In mid-February, T and Albert were communicating right around Valentine's Day. She was still trying to convince everyone online that she was innocent, and that Albert and her were sticking together, that they loved each other, and they would remain true to each other. She just knew that everyone owed her an apology, and that they would never find Gannon because Gannon was still alive somewhere, she claimed. She knew that they were searching the highway. She never thought that they would ever find him. And I think that she figured that eventually her and Albert would be able to get back together, and life would go on as normal. The 13th of February, though, she starts telling Albert different versions of the story. I heard 4 different stories from her in a very short period of time. She claimed that she was raped by a man named Quincy Brown at her house, and that Brown abducted Gannon. She even went as far as to send Albert a picture of this man. I think it was evident to her at that point that they knew that there was no Eduardo. Her second change to this story was that Quincy actually followed them from Petco. At some point, he was laying in the middle of the road in front of her. She stopped to not run him over. He then jumped up and got in the car and made her take him home, where he raped her. She also claimed that whenever the police arrived that evening on the 27th, that the abductor was still in the house, and she tried to tell deputies that somebody else was there, but they didn't pick up on her subtle hints. Deputies had checked the entirety of the house that evening, and no additional person was located. And then her fourth story, of course she had to explain why her GPS put her in the area of the highway where they were searching. She said that her and Gannon were near County Line Road and Highway 105 in North El Paso County whenever Gannon was riding his bicycle in the area, fell, hit his head, and then was abducted by Quincy Brown. In this story, Quincy was being driven by a man named Terrence. What's funny is these 4 stories, none of them add up to what she told people online. It all caught up to her though. March 2nd, she was arrested, and thank God Gannon was found on March 17th. He was found in Pace, Florida, in a suitcase. 2 men that were doing work on a bridge actually located him. I think T thought that she threw him off and into the water. However, right where he was, there was no water, just rocks. As almost a taunt to his parents and internet people, around that same time she posted a video of Gannon in Hawaii, jumping off a bridge and waving goodbye. All of the details of his gruesome murder, all of the evidence that they have against T. Gannon still hasn't gotten justice. 2 years later, T continues to play games. She's sent letters to YouTubers, social media people, writing a storyline that sounded as if it was taken directly from the Twilight movies. She's claimed to have mental health issues. She's a vampire. She's gone by Taylor, Janelle, Dr. Stauch, Carmen, Angel, Leanne. She did 2 competency evals, turned around and fired her lawyers after she was found competent to stand trial, convinced the judge that she was competent enough to represent herself, just to turn around and then request a lawyer after seeing all of the evidence that Mike Allen has against her. We have only been able to read small amounts of the evidence, but they're telling us that it's 27,000 pages long. T has said she's had multiple different medical ailments during the course of this trial, and now's no different. She's trying to say that she has dissociative identity disorder, getting sent soon for yet another evaluation to be done on her. I think the judge is finally fed up, though. The writing is in the peanut butter. It's time to get this show on the road and justice for Gannon. They have 6 weeks set aside for the trial, beginning at the end of March, with actual trial dates beginning in April. Pray for this family and for these witnesses that this trial doesn't continue to get delayed. It's time for justice for Gannon. In the description of this video, I'm dropping the link for a petition. This petition is to urge the judge to allow media access into this trial. T wants nothing more than to hide and for people not to see the true monster that she is. So please sign this petition and share it. Thank you all for taking the time to watch this video. Please hit the like button on the way out and share. And if you're interested in seeing a second video about Gannon, please subscribe. I'm thinking that I'm going to do one about his trial and the crazy letters and events that led up to this point. Thank you all again. Have a good night.